Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ecstatic Business Show. And I am truly ecstatic to introduce you to my dear sister, Brooke Casanovas. It was just sort of love at first sight whenever we first met. Thank you, Brandon Fong, for introducing us. I will always be grateful for the amazing network that you have. And Brooke is this amazing connector. She has this ability to just connect with you at a soul level. And it's not just, it seems to be that everybody she interacts with has this connection to her. And so, Brooke, what I would love for you to do is share a little bit about kind of who you are and what is your big mission on the planet, and what are you passionate about these days? And then we're going to go into your story of how did you get here. And then for those of you guys who want to stick with us, we're going to talk about some tips and some tricks and some hacks for how do we co-create reality and clarity for ourselves within the context of community. So it's going to be a really fantastic episode. And Brooke, tell us a little bit more about you and your mission.
Oh my gosh, Caitlin, well, I'm just so excited to be here and so excited for anyone that is tuning in now or tuning in later. I personally am just so grateful to be in your presence and to always learn from you. My name is Brooke Casanova. I got married almost 2 years ago to my lover, who is amazing. He is French, and so we just don't hate that. And we got an upgrade in our last name. So like my last name went from Boring Evans, that's like one syllable, to like Casanova. And it's like, oh my gosh, how did we deserve this? We don't. So that's a little bit about me. He's so incredible, so grateful for him. And then as far as like business and what I do, and you're going to hear a lot about how we got here, but because there's a lot to the history and the story, as there is with everyone that has a moment in time where they reflect on like what got them to the place that they're at presently. But right now, currently, I am really doing something where I'm creating an intentional community and have curated an intentional community for people that are in deep transition. So whether that's in business or personal life, most often you find that it's CEOs that are maybe going to board or exited CEOs that don't know what's next, or even people that have come out of the transition and they're starting something new, and maybe they're adjusting their audience or their offer, or they're applying their skill set in a new way. But the commonality is that they're in deep transition. And as we all know, like anytime any of us experience transitions, it's a very vulnerable place to be. And it's really difficult to be in that space without people to support you. And I am just so grateful to the people that I can be a witness of, one, the transitions that they're going through and see their success and their transformation on the other side. But most importantly, I love being a connector for those people to provide the support, the community, the business partnerships, the family vacation buddies that they can go with to make their world better and happier. So that's a little bit about me. My community is called the Last Mastermind, and there's a reason for that name too. But that's a little bit about me, and it's been such a ride. It's been so fun.
And how did you get into this? Where did you come from? Like, what inspired this as the thing that you want to focus on?
Yeah, my mission of really helping people that were in deep transition, and also just curating communities where collaborations and so much abundance could take place instead of competition, actually started about 10 years ago. So that's when I began my entrepreneur journey. And I have tried this was not the thing that I'm doing now is probably my like 9th or 10th rodeo, as it is for most. But the first, the second, the third, the 7th, those were all me being immersed in like being a coach or a consultant. And I did a lot of sales work like you did. And so I did a lot of high ticket sales. I went into businesses, I scaled their businesses. Some of them I sold for, some of them I trained their sales reps with. And it wasn't that sales was what I loved, but I found that it was what I was good at. So I just like placed myself there, and I gave it my all. And what it really was is like, sales is really service. And I am a relator. Like, as you said at the very beginning, like I love connecting on a very deep and wide level with anyone in front of me. And so naturally, because of that, my conversion rates were just incredibly high because of that skill set. But I soon found that after doing this for years, it was just like, it's one thing to do something that you're really good at, and it's another thing to do something that you really, really love and are fulfilled with. And that was just like not like marking the box for me. It was that I was really, really good at, and it was paying really, really great money. But at the end of the day, I was like burnt out. I was miserable. I was selling other people's things. And I I don't know. I think that there was a lot of connections that I made and a lot of people that I met that were so incredible, but the greatest part of me was missing, which was there was no fulfillment on my end. I would sell and then I'd hand them off, and it was like I never spoke to those people again, and that's just so unlike me, right? And so I from that journey, throughout all of my sales consulting experiences, I had been attending and hosting different masterminds. And when I would go, people would ask me if I would come to their masterminds. They started asking me if I would come as an attendee to their masterminds, not for the same purposes that you might expect to, like, just get the next sell, fill the next seat, or have a good time. It was literally, they were inviting me, and they'd be pretty transparent. They were inviting me to come to their mastermind to enhance the culture, the community, and the collaborations that exist there that I could just naturally facilitate for everyone. Because just because you're a good CEO doesn't mean that you're a really good natural facilitator. And so I was hosting people's masterminds. I was facilitating people's masterminds. I was being asked to attend people's masterminds, and that was like so great. But again, at the end of the day, it was like, it was not my room. But I found that, like, in all of that, again, during my sales consultant experience, like something was missing. And it wasn't until 2020 when I really hit what I would say like rock bottom in terms of like COVID was a very big exposure for me of like being with myself and seeing what lit me up and why I was doing what I was doing. And I think that my level of like frequency and awareness was that why I was doing what I was doing most of the time in terms of the sales was just, it was to get the next thing and to chase the next dollar and to grind and at whatever cost to get it. And that was like, it was just so exhausting, And so, because it was never enough. There was never anything that I could do or number that I could make, even if it was like millions, that would ever satisfy this ongoing need, because it's just not an eternal principle. Like, money is so good, but it's not meant to be like chased or grinded for. Like, it's meant to remain pure, and my intentions just like weren't that great. And so COVID really became like this stopping place for me, where it was like, what have you done for the last 10 years, and what are you good at, and what do you enjoy the most? And what I found that I was good at is like, I was really good at connecting with people. I was really good at naturally putting business partnerships together and like making people win and helping their lives be better and happier through their offers and who they need to connect with. And it was like, and I was really, really good at facilitating, but my joy was found when I was like in a room in person with people. And again, COVID, like, it brought this up because we weren't we weren't in person with anyone. And I was just like, wow, like, why am I so off? And it made me realize, like, it was a great exposure. Like, you're not with people and you're not gathering. And myself, like, in business, but mostly in my personal life up to that point, I had been like an intense gatherer. Like, I loved gathering. The size of my couch is like excessively big for just me and my husband. It's like, it's ridiculous. But the reason for it is not because we have like 20 people that live here that could fit on this like massive L couch. It's because we love gathering and we love being with people. And COVID really showed me that, like, that's where my emptiness was, but it also became my greatest gift, because I was like, that's where the gift is. And it just so happened that during that time I had like, okay, so if this is my gift, like, where's the pivot and how do I do this and what do I need to do? It just so happened that during that time I had a number of friends that were like, hey, Brooke, would you mind going to lunch with me? Would love to catch up. And this was like probably a year and a half after COVID. And so I went, and these were people like, you would not believe it, Caitlin. Like on the outside, they had just exited their business. They were making millions. They had made millions. They had like incredibly networked, incredibly successful, great families. And then when we would get to lunch, they would be like, okay, but I'm actually not okay. Can you tell me, can I tell you about this? And I was like, oh, like this is what the lunch is for. And then they would begin to tell me like everything that was difficult or hard. And I resonated so much with it because I was in my own transition, right? And I was like, I know the vulnerable place. And for these people, it was very, very difficult because you wouldn't imagine how isolating it is for people that have sold for millions or exited for millions, or even like that are in a very, very successful, high profile place, because most people they can't express this hardship with, because most of society would be like, let me play you a small violin. They don't treat them as like human. There's like not a lot of passion or empathy, because the end game for most of society is what my end game used to be, which was like, you're just there to make the money. But that's
right.
not,
And are you complaining? Like
yes.
You won the game. Stop bitching. Like
yes, exactly. And but for whatever reason, they were like, I feel like I can confide in you. And I felt like there was this space where like all of a sudden these people started asking me out for like lunch or like to get on a Zoom call. And they started expressing this transition without me even asking for it. So I was like, the best thing I can do for my friends, it wasn't even a business model yet. I was like, the best thing I can do for my friends is like curate a room where they can all meet and see that they're completely, yes, and see that they're like completely normal, and that this process and this like grieving of what was that's now not going to be is absolutely normal, and it's okay. And we can hold space for the sadness, and we can also hold space for being the cheerleaders for them and for each other. So
and that's so powerful. And it relates to my own story, because I remember it was when I finally checked every single box. Like, I swear, Brooke, I had the perfect life. I had married the love of my life. I had 3 beautiful blonde babies. We had the successful business. I had published all the books. I had my master's degree. We were literally traveling the world. I was sitting on a tropical beach with everybody's dream life going, fuck, like I am still miserable. Like, how do I declare bankruptcy? How do I file for divorce? How do I like run away from this amazing life that I have built, but is still not enough? And that's when so I think it's really important, because there is a certain advantage to checking all of your own boxes, to having all of the success and all of the money, and getting to that point where you have to face it and you're like, nope, that was not what I was at. Like, my ladder was up against the wrong wall. I am at the top of my ladder and I am nowhere close to where I wanted to be. And so it is rare to be surrounded with people who are that successful and that self-aware, right? That you can attain that level of personal development, and wow, I recognize I've done everything I set out to do and more, and it still isn't fulfilling my soul. And I think you notice that, your friends notice that, I've noticed that. And I think it's hard for people who haven't finished climbing the ladder. They do. They look at us going like, what the crap? Like, why are you complaining? Because like, you're so far up the thing that I'm climbing. And I think it's important for us to like look down and be like, just as a heads up, you might want to check in at a soul level and make sure this is really what you want. Because if it's like an if then, like, if I can make more money, then I'll be happy. If I get the lover, then I'll be happy. If I had healing in my body, then I would be happy, right? Admittedly, chronic pain is a nuisance, but like still, like anytime you make your happiness dependent on an external circumstance, you're dooming yourself, because it is never actually going to live up to it. And so it's that for me, and I'd love to hear what you guys discovered inside of the mastermind, but for me, the epiphany was like, oh no, I have to play the inner game first.
Mhm,
I have to find the unconditional happiness
mhm.
and joy and peace. And then it turns out like, yeah, maybe everything around you burns away because it's no
Mhm.
longer in alignment. But that commitment, like, I think where I've come to is like, I'm not always happy, but I'm finally me, right? And like,
Mhm.
I'm okay with that being like,
Mhm.
I'm no longer chasing this elusive idea of happiness. I'm now chasing, okay, what does it mean for me to be authentic to myself right now in this moment?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's rage, and sometimes
Mm.
that's grief, sometimes it's ecstasy, right? But like
Mm.
that commitment to myself first, and then the emotional state can be whatever it wants to be. Like the hurricane can
Yeah.
rage as long as
Yeah.
I can stay grounded in the eye of my own storm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. And even the comparisons that you used, I think, are so similar to all of us that go through this. I think you reach a breaking point where you realize that, like, you weren't in alignment, so you were showing up as fake, and, like,
Mhm,
what does it look like to feel and be authentic? Or
mhm.
what does it look like to not force everything in your life, but just let it come to you? Like,
Yeah.
or what does it look like to do the inner work instead of chasing all of the outside stuff? And so these are all just very interesting dichotomies and different things to consider, especially when you're in transition, because they're I think at the end of the day, it's asking yourself the question of like, what is gonna last the longest? And
Mm,
the things that last the longest are usually the harder things, but they're the more fulfilling and eternal things inside of us that
mm,
our ladder can never be against the wrong wall if we really
mm,
recognize what those are, and all of those things will be things that are inside instead of things that are outside, like you said, that we think will
mhm,
make us happy. But I think for me, there was a couple of realizations. One, to kind of close this loop is, it being in that room with all of those individuals, I was like, "Wow, what a beautiful thing to witness, and what a beautiful thing to
mm,
be a part of," and to even have it be a mirror for me of, like, they're taking me through my own transition, which was so, so kind of them. Um,
mm,
but I think also for the past decade, what I didn't share is that I had always been the person that was in the back corner of like every single community and mastermind and taking notes about like why the synergies were off, or like why the collaborations weren't happening, or why the scarcity was showing up, instead of like why the connection, the depth, the collaboration, the community, the clarity, and the abundance could
mhm,
exist. And so I can't tell you how many, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars I have invested in, and I still believe in investing in specific communities because there's so much power in community. But I also cannot tell you, like, the reason I curated the Last Mastermind was not just because my friends that needed this through their transition, but was also because I was like, this is it. This is my mission. It's to create the room that no one knew existed, but everyone wanted. And
mm,
it was the room where it was, like, very high skill set people with very, very high EQs that were incredibly inquisitive and very self-aware, were
mhm,
showing up to play a vulnerable game and to meet with people that they were completely not only open to give, but they were in a space where they were going to practice their receiving muscles, and they were open to any collaboration.
mm,
And so I was like, I can take all of the notes from the past decade of the gatherings I've been to, and I wanna do exactly opposite of what I found was not working for me and for others through my observation, and I wanna create the room that, like,
mhm.
combined all of the best practices and things that did work and put that into a 3-day experience, and it's just been that's how we got to the last mastermind. It's been amazing.
Amazing. I can't wait to attend one of these. It sounds delicious. And that's kind of what I want to go into. Like, practically, what have you discovered? Like, what is important? Because I do think, and you and I talked about it a little bit about this before the show, is that we can't create our own reality. The idea of
Yeah.
objective reality is just a myth that
Yeah.
there is matter, but even matter is an illusion, right? There is no
Sure.
actual solidity. It's just vibrational frequency energy at all the times. And I think for us as humans, we co-create. Like if I ask you, who are you, Brooke? Right?
Mhm.
Instinctively, you will define yourself with your relationships. I
Mhm.
am wife,
Mhm.
I am a friend, I am a sister, I am a daughter, right?
Sure.
Whatever these are, right? Our core I am identity is always going to relate to the humans that we
Mm.
connect with, even or our fur babies, right? But we need relationship to know who we are and where we are in the universe. Like other humans are how we triangulate
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that feedback is how we co-create our reality. We
Yeah.
know who we are because we have these mirrors reflecting us. And so
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we choose good mirrors, right? That they say that mirror neurons, you're looking constantly around you in order to see who am I and who do I want to be.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you're surrounding yourself, if you are the product of the 5 people that you surround yourself with,
Yeah.
who are you surrounding yourself with becomes
Yeah.
ultimately the most important question you'll ever ask.
Yeah.
So unpack that a little bit. What have you
Yeah.
discovered
Yeah.
about why community is important to us? And very practically, how have you cultivated it? What are your best principles for pulling people
Mm.
into relationship in your circles?
Yeah. Well, I want to start based on just like what you just said about this idea of mirroring and like being the average of the top 5 people that you spend your time with. I think before anyone curates any community, it is so important to go inward, not outward.
Mhm.
I think that, and one of the best ways to do that is looking at your past community and seeing that your customers or your clientele or your people will always tell on you. And what I mean by that is your customers or your people are a direct reflection of your frequency, your energy, your fears, your dreams. Like you attract who you are, not what you sell. And it
Mhm.
is so, so important to take a moment and like get feedback from that. And I
Mhm.
have seen when my energy shifts, the automatically the first thing that also shifts are the people. I
Yeah.
start getting new people into my life, or like the old people and end up like just like kind of drifting away. And I think that it's so, so important. We talk a lot about what we need to do, but I think the more important practical thing is who do we want to become? Because who we
Mm.
will become is going to dictate who we attract. And your customers will
Yeah.
always tell on you. And so I think it's really important to decide first, who do you want to become? Like, do you want to become
Mhm.
someone like for me, I want to always become someone and be in the process of becoming someone that's generous, that's abundant, that's collaborative, that's very clear and decisive, that is incredibly
Mm.
community oriented, that practices giving as much as receiving, that is very conscious, that's incredibly inquisitive. And I know that as I become that, what's actually going to be a byproduct of that is not just me becoming a different person, but me attracting those types of people. And so before you decide who your community is, look at your last community and say, what what did they tell on me about? Like, who am I?
Mm.
Because they will be mirrors for you. And I think that that is
Mhm.
so, so important to recognize. So that would be the first thing, is do the inner work that you're talking about and look at the people in your life right now and go, Is that who I am and who I want to be? And if not, what are the values that need to shift? Or what are the principles of living that I need to become so that I can attract different people into my life? Um,
Mm.
so that would be the first thing. But then the second thing is, I think that most people want a leader. They want a leader that can take them from point A to point Z. But how do you become the leader that they want? I think that the second principle, I was just speaking with a friend about this. All of us love this like Taylor Swift era, and we're just amazed at like what she has done and who she is and who she's become through all of it. But one thing that I find so fascinating is the commonality between Taylor Swift and Princess Diana specifically, and what
Mm.
they have both in common. And the reason that like America loves both of them so much, even though Diana has passed, her name still carries on, is because of two things that we can really take and apply to being the leader that people want us to be for our communities. And that is they were both relatable and aspirational. So they aren't just like, oh my gosh, Taylor, I see me in you. Your songs are about me. Like, you know what it feels like to have a breakup. It's not just, I relate with you on that, which she's so good at doing, but it's also not just, I see me in her. It's, I also want to be her. Right. And so it's like this, you're walking with me on the journey, but you're also like 500 miles ahead of me. And her and Diana both did that for the people. Like, and the reason that they were so relatable is because they loved their fans, and they loved their people. You saw Diana, that was the first one to like break royal conduct and like actually touch people and like be with the people in the streets. And then you see Taylor, that's like the first like pop star to actually start giving like all of these charities and donations to like these really like no-name causes, or like giving bonuses to truck drivers, or like being besties with her backup dancers, or just being, creating a type of culture where like little girls trade bracelets and like share love. Like, it's so, so important that we're both relatable and aspirational. And in order to be relatable, we have to share the lows as much as we share the highs with the people that we serve. Like, vulnerability is an actual requirement for connection. And I think Taylor and Diana did that so well. But what they also did so well is like they became someone through it. They were incredibly aspirational of like, I get you, and like, but I'm also on the other side of that too. And so I think it's just important that we just like we identify and take those principles from these two powerhouse women and recognize like I love what Princess Diana said in an interview. She was like, one of the questions was, so do you see yourself being queen one day? And everyone was listening in on the radio and on the TV, and her response was quite interesting. She says, no, I don't see myself being queen of this country, but I hope to be the queen in people's hearts. I was like, okay, this is so beautiful. Like, Taylor and Diana got it. This is the game of winning hearts. And what business CEOs do you know that are in the game of winning hearts and making sure that their fans, their clientele, and their people are better and happier because they were in their lives? Like, I just don't know of a better principle for community than to be relatable and aspirational and have the intent and the motive be, I'm going to win their hearts. And not, I'm going to win their like their checkbook, not I'm going to win their connections or their status, not I'm going to win whatever it is X needs to be to get a transactional relationship out of it so that you give something to get something. It's just, there's no transaction. It's purely transformation of like, how do I win their hearts so that this can be like a deep and connective experience? So that would be the second.
And I want to just double down on that, because I feel like what you're describing is feminine leadership, right?
Absolutely.
Doesn't have to be female leadership, but feminine leadership. And it's so powerful because, I mean, classically educated, right? You go back to Machiavelli. He's like, it's better to be loved than feared, but if like, well, it's better to be loved than feared, but it's best if you're both, right? And this masculine leadership style that has been passed down from this expectation that you need to maintain fear in order to maintain power, that there is a hierarchical system and it sucks to be at the bottom, right? Your job is to climb to the top of the ladder. And there are so many things that I love about masculine energy, and the yang side of the universe is so necessary. But I am increasingly convinced that it was never designed to be the leader. It was always designed to be the servant of the feminine. And the feminine is always the leader. The feminine is what we use to imagine, to create, to see possibilities, to live in the future, not the now, to reflect on the past, not the now, right? There's this beautiful, like, and I think especially as women, right, when we move from matriarchal societies to patriarchal societies, and I'm not saying that one's better than the other, but like the goal, I think, has always been to allow the feminine to lead and set the vision. And then the masculine energy comes to build the systems and implement the structure and figure out the how once they've seen the what and the why. This is where we're going. This is why we're going there. And then the masculine comes in and says, great, let's build some systems. Let's make this happen. Let's increase efficiency. Right.
Yeah.
But like, so what you're saying, I do want to emphasize that, yes, I think we will see this most easily in women leaders than men leaders, but this is not a gender thing that you're describing.
No.
I think that the new leaders, male and female, need to embrace this feminine leadership of, like, I love what you said, like the game is winning hearts, right? Right. We want to win all the hearts, and that's how we shoot the moon in the game of hearts, right? And so having that be the objective, and it's so affirming for me, right? Because it is hard to live with your heart wide open, like to say, this is the grief, this is the pain, this is the raw and uncomfortable, and I'm just going to be with it, and I'm going to be okay with it, which is mean that you get to be okay with it with me, right? Which means that you get to be okay with it with yourself. And so that invitation, that vulnerability is necessary for connection. It's the hardest. It's so hard, because you're right. Like when we are feeling raw, it's just instinctive that we want to like cover ourselves up and protect ourselves with an exoskeleton. We're like, I am this juicy, awkward, like I'm going to just pretend I've got it all together, and I'm going to pack myself into this nice, neat little package. And I'm going to put some like hard creatine around me so that nobody can get the juicy middle inside. But like the opposite, it's so counterintuitive. Like as mammals, at some point in our species, we decided to live with the squishy bits on the outside and our skeleton on the inside. So some point in evolutionary design, our ancestors realized if we want to become who we want to become, we have to live with the squishy bits on the outside, right? And I think what you're down on is like our spiritual evolution is finally catching up. Like if we want to be the people that we want to be, we have to live with the squishy bits on the outside, you know?
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. And it's amazing the types of people that will show up into your life that, I mean, because have you ever been in like a collective room where literally everyone has stripped and done the work, the personal work behind closed doors to like really strip the ego, and then you put all of them in one room together? Let me just tell you, it is magical. There are very few things that I have to do when I am in a room with those people and I'm facilitating, because organically and naturally, because they're not trying to force anything and they let everything come, there is just like, they're on the universe's agenda and they're not on their own. And it is like so organic and powerful and full of love on the things that happen, which really leads me to what I would say is like my third point. And that is, I would call it like the networking alchemy. So I had this really crazy experience where there was this guy that I had been following. His name's Randy Garn. He knows everyone and anyone, and he's amazing. And I was like, I need to get on a call with him because he embodies a lot of who I want to become in terms of people, relationships, connections, collaborations, which is my natural skill set. So I get on this call and I say, okay, so like he is like, he's probably in his early 50s, maybe. I said, okay, if you were to go back in time as like a 36-year-old like myself, what would you have done differently, or what did you do that made all the difference? And he said the most fascinating thing to me. He said, Brooke, the most important exercise I ever did in my entire career is, he said, after I sold my business, and it was like very early on, I think he was probably late 20s, early 30s. He said, I took a year of sabbatical off. And on that year, I wrote down a list of 21 people that I wanted to just, the entire year was just focused on building deep, meaningful relationships with these 21 people. Not just for me to get something from them, but to really develop love and trust and like camaraderie. And he said they were all in different industries. They were all doing very different things. And he said for an entire year, when people were like, what are you up to? It was like, I named one of those people. Like that's where he was spending his time and energy.
Mm.
And I said, what did you learn after you did that? And he said, this is the most fascinating thing. Out of the 21 people that I had listed that I like thought I wanted to become and I wanted to like be in cohorts with and do things with, he said, what I realized after spending that time with the 21, I realized that only 7 of them were real. And I was like, whoa. And he was like, so then what I did is after I discerned that of like who what really was the real deal and had like the purest of intents, I spent the next few years just doubling down on the 7. And that has made all the difference. And this is coming from a guy that now in his 40s, maybe 50s, is the most connected human. You will see him in every room. You will see him introducing on any stage, any person, whether it goes from like Tony and Dean to like owner of the Utah Jazz to like, I mean, this guy is everywhere and he's not everywhere so that he has like the status symbol. He's everywhere because I personally believe that like the 7 people that he saw as like the real deal that like he nurtured and he invested in just multiplied by hundreds and then thousands. And it's like, how do we do that and take that framework into our own personal lives? Well, me, what that has looked like for my networking alchemy and just the way that my brain works is like any person that I meet, I'm always thinking, who are they? And who do they need to know that would bless or make their lives better or happier? Or the second question is, who are they? And whose life do I know that they need and could make their lives better and happier? And I'm always leaving different experiences with every person going, who can I connect them to? Whether to be a giver or to a receiver. But that is so, so important to me. And it's come back like tenfold in being a connector. But I think that we don't utilize human capital and connection for what it's worth. We're looking, so many people are looking for like the pockets of money, but what they don't realize is like the people are who have the pockets, and that's not why you're connecting with them anyways. And so I love the story of Randy. I love the networking alchemy that I've tried to apply in my own personal relationships of like, who do they need to know to make or receive their lives better or happier? And it has just like, it's changed everything. And especially in groups of women, because there is so much collaboration to be had and so much less competition to be experienced. But until we see people for who they really are and who they can become, all of that scarcity will start showing up. And unless we do the inner work to heal that inside of us and recognize that who we are is enough, then we can start making magic happen for everyone else.
Oh, there's so many things that I want to highlight there, but I love this idea. There's a great book called Go Givers Sell More. So the Go Givers book, and then there's the Sell More one version of it. But it was a great reminder that we can give first, and that there is just this natural law of reciprocity that is wired into good humans. And if they don't reciprocate, beware, right? There is a lack of empathy that is not what you want to cultivate. So it's a really beautiful gift. I just started doing this lately. Is like when I get on a call, it's like, how can I give? How can I support? What do you want? How can I give? And it's just my goal to like give and give and give as much as possible on that first call. And then I just wait and see how they let the call end. And if they let the call end with, oh, thank you, you're so generous, this has been so great, all right, bye-bye, fabulous. I just got really clear that this is not my person. If they reciprocate saying like, oh my gosh, and how can I bless you? What do you want? Where can I connect you? Like, now I have found my person, right? Because that, and it's the easiest way to clean out your network really quickly on the first conversation, to just say, hey, are you are you an active recipient in this law of reciprocity? Are you a
Yeah.
giver as a receiver?
Yeah.
And can you do both well? Because I think that
Yeah.
sometimes women will do one and not the other. Sometimes we give more than we receive, and sometimes we receive more than we give.
Yeah.
So this beautiful, it actually reminds me way back at the beginning, I had pinned your quote of money is not supposed to be chased, it's supposed to stay pure. And I had a mystical interaction with money. And we were supposed to write a letter to money, and then money was supposed to write a letter back to us. And what I realized is this thing we call money has been a principle since we first started gathering around campfires. And it's a she, like she is simply value exchange. Like that is, like, you want to think of her as a goddess, like the goddess that we now call money is actually just how do I give and receive value? And she is this language of giving and receiving. And so she shows up in every transaction, right? So she is the goddess of transactions. But what she told me is like, I've gotten prostituted, right? Like people have gotten so confused, like in what I am and what I mean. And when I became associated with currency, that kind of put a weird incarnated tangibility to me that was never there in the first place.
Yeah.
And now people can't really see me through the gold and the silver and the dollar bills.
Yeah.
And they think that I'm the thing. And I'm like, I was never the thing. Like I was simply the blessing of the giving and the receiving. And like, and so it just like, it blew my mind when I had this conversation with her, because I was like, oh, got it. Like, we don't worship you, we worship through you. Like you are the means, the conduit by which the channel by which I build connections. And that is the true wealth. That it's the other person on the other end of the line that is my true asset. That is my true wealth portfolio. Like, so what you're saying is invest deeply in humans, because going back to your original thing, we are the only eternal principles, right? C.S. Lewis is like, you don't understand, and I'll paraphrase badly, but he's like, you don't understand. You go around thinking that civilizations are these multi-thousand-year things, but the person in front of you is the only thing that's going to last forever, right? That the civilizations will crumble and fall, businesses will be built and sold, but the soul that is sitting across from you at the table, that is an eternal soul, right? You are going to have to live as glory or monster for all eternity. And so as you think about how do you build around things that last, these relationships for hundreds now, but I've had people that I'm pretty convinced we are on their 20th lifetime together, that we have been on this journey of evolution and soul consciousness, right? And so thinking, like, shifting your perspective of not how do I get money so that how do I get people so I can make money? It's how can I like get people, like develop these relationships with humans. I'm not saying this eloquently at all, but like this paradigm shift of people first, I think is what I want to say. And then the money will later.
Yeah. Oh, so good. It's so true. It's so true. And really that makes me think of like one last thing when we were talking before of like what is the gift or a gift that I could share with this audience or whoever is listening to this. And it just really hit me that like I think one of the greatest gifts that I could give is anyone that you want to be connected to in my network that I could create an introduction for, or like a potential collaboration after I learn about you and what you do and what your strengths are and what your gifts are and where your value shows up. And so that's one thing that I would absolutely be super interested in like helping your people with is like, get on my calendar and let's connect and let me see how I can introduce you to someone that you can bless and make their life better or happier, or someone that can make theirs better or happier. It would be a pleasure.
So I'm putting your LinkedIn. I mean, it's just your name, Brooke with an E, and then Casanovas with an S. So for you guys listening in, definitely make sure you connect with Brooke on LinkedIn. And then, yeah, I think to that end, one of the things I didn't understand about referrals. So when I was still learning how to build my business and getting referrals, I would say, well, I'll pay you to send me a referral.
Yeah.
And what I realized is like by accident, I sort of discovered that it actually killed my referrals. When I wasn't paying cash, I got referrals. When I started paying cash, I got no referrals. And what I realized is this is not why people refer people. Like
Yeah.
a referral is a social capital exchange.
Yeah.
And when you make an introduction to me, it's because you want both of us to add value, right?
Yeah.
You are going to introduce me to so-and-so because you think that I'm going to improve, be a good return on your capital and your social capital investment with both parties by making that introduction. And so now I just view referrals as like the most precious gift that anybody could give me because we're entrusting, we just talked about it, the most valuable asset in your wealth portfolio to me, right? And now it's my job to pay dividends on that investment. Like your person needs to walk away better than when you handed them to me so that you, by reflection, have enriched that relationship and your network is stronger because you introduced me to someone. And so it was like, when I understood that, then it was like, oh, it's just my responsibility to love on this human that I got introduced to and give as generously as I know how to give to them. And if it results in some sort of like work together, fabulous. But that's not, again, that's not the goal. The goal is to give as generously as possible.
Without
and
attachment.
then just without attachment. Yeah, exactly.
I
I love this. Okay, so for those of you guys who maybe are going through your own season of transition, you love the idea of experiencing a room where nobody's wearing their exoskeleton armor, and you would love to experience Brooke and her amazing ability to facilitate community well, check out the lastmastermind.com. It really is a beautiful community there. And for just connect with Brooke on LinkedIn, Brooke Casanovas. Brooke, any last pieces of wisdom, or just if you were speaking to the women in my audience and you just wanted to love on them one last time, what do you want them to remember as we're wrapping up?
I think that one thing that I would love for them to remember is that the most important heart that they can win is their own. And it's so, so, so important to like, not in a worldly way, become self-consumed and idolizing of self, but in a way of like healthy self-love. I think it is so important to practice daily, getting into the practice of, okay, am I in alignment? And that alignment being I'm full of like grace and gratitude and love for myself and for others. And when you're not, just like releasing and having forgiveness for self and forgiveness of others, because it is truly love that is the greatest like influencer of all. And it's not just love for others, but it's also love for self. And so you'll be better at winning other people's hearts as soon as you've won your own.
Oh, that is so what I'm going through right now. Like I used my morning pages from the Julia Cameron exercise. Like my morning pages was just a love letter to myself. Like that was like, okay, this is what I need this morning. But I also want to just highlight, I think especially Christian upbringing worldview, we're worried about being proud. And what I realized is pride is not thinking too highly of yourself because it's impossible, right? You are the divine incarnate, right? It is impossible for you to think too highly of yourself. Pride is simply thinking too little of others, right? It's not recognizing that the person in front of you is also the divine incarnate, is also this everlasting glory. And that's the only time we get in trouble. So it's not like absolutely worship yourself, but also worship the person in front of you and the person on the street and the person that you meet in the boardroom. Like that this all of life should just be like a constant experience of namaste, right? Which just literally translates to the divine in me, acknowledges the divine in you,
Yeah.
right? And all of our interactions when we're doing them well should feel like acts of worship.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. Well, pride isn't just looking down on people, it's also looking up. And I think
Mm.
that if we can really see that we are, I love what you said, like there, we can never be too proud of ourselves and think too highly. It's when we like start diminishing others or putting
Mm.
ourselves on a pedestal that's either higher than others or way lower than others. That's where we get in trouble.
Right. This
Yeah.
hierarchical goes back to what you said at the beginning, is like when we are seeing each other as above or below us, they're either competitors or threats, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're in this like food chain of relationships. But if we can see the millionaire as
Mhm.
just a human, and we can
Mm,
see the homeless person as just a human,
mm,
right? And we can love ourselves as just a human, and that there is love and grace for every single person. Like,
mm.
what an amazing world that this could be.
You are doing such a wonderful work, and I'm so grateful that I was able to spend time with you this morning. It was so beautiful. Thank you so much for having me.
Me too. Thank you so much, Brooke. Talk to you.